The Irish Rally Podcast is brought to you in association with Tech and Tools, SVS Productions, PFT Travel, Rally Connection and Murray Motorsport.
So Eugene Donnelly, currently leading, double world champion.
You're really making a meal out of that, aren't you?
Absolutely.
No, I think a little bit down to luck, and Marcus had a few problems, like he had a puncture and a couple of spins and one thing and another. But, you know, okay, it's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Eugene Donnelly, welcome to The Whole Person, and thank you very much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. The whole person.
The whole person. We're going to hear the
Yeah.
full story now today, Eugene. No, it is a rally podcast. We were chatting about this. It absolutely is, but it's a wee bit of a twist in here. So, as you know, probably at this stage, I love to ask questions, and you know, really, what I love is getting to know people, getting to know the workings of people in the world around me, and
You're a nosy
most
Parker.
importantly, you could say that too, I suppose.
Oh, actually, most women
most
are
importantly,
nosy.
I suppose, always the way. But I suppose most importantly, the idea for this podcast came because I want to know who you are in your own words. You know, it's very important to me that we hear your story from you, if you know what I mean. And so for that reason, I've actually decided to not give an intro. Now, to be fair, as soon as your name's mentioned, I don't think too many people will need an intro. They'll know exactly who you are and all of the achievements and accolades. But I don't give the intro on purpose because it was a thoughtful process, and it's purely because I want to hear from you, your story. And so with all that being said, we'll get stuck straight into it. Can you tell us about the early days of Eugene Donnelly, your childhood, where you grew up, how rallying started for you?
I suppose, I was born into a family business. My dad had a Ford agency. I was born in 1967, so, I was born at a great time for motorsport and a great time for the development of cars in general. And I grew up in a little village called Dripperstown in County Derry. And to be fair, my first memories are standing, my mum holding me on the kitchen table looking out the back window and rows of brand new cars sitting there, and they were all Cortinas and Anglas and Escorts and old Corsairs and all that sort of stuff, that's all I ever knew was cars, Now, I never had much interest in working on them. That was his real thing, my brother Charlie. But, they always fascinated me. And, I can remember just being a wee boy sitting on my dad's knee, steering the car, and sitting in the front seat with him driving, and I just was always fascinated by them. So as soon as I could touch the pedals, I started to drive. Now, we lived in Dripperstown until I was about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years of age. And we moved to Mahara, which is a bit better known, a place my dad bought a garage there on the Coleraine Road there, which is still there to this day. And, that's where I started to learn to drive, just around the garage. Mm-hmm. And we had a farm just outside the town of Mahara, so I had plenty of space to driving up and down the lanes and around the fields and all that sort of thing, But being around Fords and the early 70s, well, there were the Mark II Escort was the most successful car, so we had loads and loads and loads of them. And the magazines used to come in to promote the new cars. And I remember on the back of these catalogues was the RS range. And it moved from being the Mark 1s to the new car in Mark II. And, you had your RS 2000, you had your RS 1800, and you had your Sports and Mexicos. And, I used to cherish those old catalogues. Like, I used to look at the pictures and just, I was in awe of the cars that just were so fascinating. Yeah. And when one came around, when my dad got a new one, if you ordered and you went in for somebody, you just sat on it and you're in awe of it, like, you know. So
Yeah.
that's really where, you know, it's really where I got the whole bug for, you know, cars, and more so than
Yeah.
actually the driving side of it. But from a personal point of view, I have to say, you know, what I'd mentioned there, the move from Dribberstown, where I went to primary school, and I had, you know, I had built up, you know, friends, and at a, you know, your young age, you go to P1 and you meet the wee boy beside you, and you know, you meet his
Yeah.
family, and you just grow on to have, you know, a selection of friends. And when I moved to Mahara, I found it extremely difficult, really, really difficult. And I'd say I ended up getting into myself a bit. I became quite shy, and I struggled massively at school. It was later in life then I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I suppose I didn't know that really until my mid-20s. I realized, you know, there's something wrong. I can't read, like, and even to this day, I
Yeah.
struggle with reading,
Yeah.
or spelling or anything like that there. So, you know, that, you know, you want the personal side of it. That was a massive struggle to move from,
Yeah.
you know, a small village to Mahara, which, don't get me wrong, it
Yeah.
wasn't a bad town or anything like that, but it was a very different town.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
a
you were in the
huge
middle of,
change at that time in your life.
yeah, you know, moving school, and then, you know, when we were in the height of the troubles at that time as well. So, you know, that would have been, I suppose, 77 or 76 or something like that there. So, you know, the
Yeah.
troubles was rife, and in Dribberstown, you know, it was very much a wee Catholic town. There was, you know, there was no sign of the troubles around the town or anything like that there. Whereas Mahara, you know, I actually witnessed when I was about 12 or 13, um, an ex-army guy getting shot across the road from the filling station. I was standing
Yeah.
pumping fuel one day when I was about 12 or 13. And, you know, Mahara was, I found when I moved there, and that whole, you know, I come into understanding the whole thing about the troubles, and I come into understanding, you know, the mixed, you know, the mixed people, and the different views. You know, along with having trouble with school, and then having that outside of school, and then being in the public eye with the business. You know, we had a petrol
Yeah.
station and we had a shop, and, you know, I'd have been giving my mum a hand with the pumps, or doing the shop with her. And, you know, you would have come into, you know, you started to realize people came from different backgrounds. So I found that
Yeah.
difficult.
Uh-huh.
And I suppose the car thing, you know, when we moved into the farm, and we, you know, I was fit to race about the yard in the cars, it was a bit of a release and a bit of an
Yeah.
adrenaline rush, you know. So very quickly, my father would have seen that, between myself and Charlie, we had a bit of an old flair for it. So he kind of turned a blind eye at us ripping about around the yard in cars that should have been really for sale, you know. So that was, that was like, my dad was a great man that way. Like, you know, if you know, if you scrape one of them, you hit one on the bump, you just tell him the truth, and he would just shake the
Yeah.
head, and, oh, we'll get it fixed. You know, he was that
Yeah.
sort of a
Brilliant.
man that, nothing bothered him too badly. You
A
know,
bit like my own dad.
but that's right. But
Got away with plenty.
got away with murder. But those days were, I have to say, were really tough. You know, and when I
And
left
did you
school when I
find
was
Eugene? Sorry, go ahead.
like, I left school when I was 15. Like, I didn't finish out my GCSEs. Well, I couldn't finish them because you know, I was that
Yeah.
poor at school. Like, maths,
Yeah.
I was absolutely brilliant at. Accountancy, I was brilliant at. But when it came to geography, English, anything to do with the written word, or reading, I was just terrible. Like, and therefore, you know, I really, really struggled through secondary school. And also a big thing that we would have been, you know, when I moved into secondary school, and we had the business, we had the family business right beside the school. And if anybody knows Mahara, they'll know the Korean Road. Well, we owned the filling station on the right hand side going out to Korean Road, and the next to that there is St Patrick's High School, and that's where I went to secondary school. And some people say, oh, school, they're great days of your life, and other people say, oh, they were terrible. Well, I'm one of the people say could say it was terrible. Like I really, really didn't like school, and not for the reason about the education. I found it a real struggle with the people, and then because we had the business right beside it, you know, people looked at me as if, oh, look at him, he's got a big business, and the kids would have come into the shop to buy their sweets and they thought we were loaded, like you know. And I wouldn't say that you know we were well off, but we weren't rich by any means, like and you know, my dad worked real hard at building the businesses, and he did very, very well, right up until you know, the late 70s, early 80s. He did extremely well, you know. But those were the challenges for me personally. Before I even became an adult, you know.
I know, yeah. And do you feel like those early days, particularly with the move, do you feel like, you know, the cars and the driving provided some sort of solace where there was such sort of upheaval, and, you know, obviously you went from having such comfort, and, you know, that saying of it takes a village, that's a beautiful saying, because it sort of reminds you that the whole village is almost like a family. And so when you leave that comfort and that space of being surrounded by people that you know you care about, and you sort of go to a bigger place where you don't know people and people don't know you, you sort of try and find things and places or people that make you feel good, or make you feel safe or in control. Do you think the cars and the driving gave you a wee bit of that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I remember sitting in the garage, you know, at nights or at the weekends when it was closed, just sitting in the cars and pretending to drive them. You know, when I was 7, 8, 9 years of age, you know, and even going on into my teens, like, you know, if I wasn't driving them around the yard or driving them around the farm, I'd be just sitting in them, listening to the radio, or, you know, just it was a place of solace, like, you know, that you got away from it all. And without a doubt, that was the attraction to it. As I said earlier, I had no great ambitions to actually work on them. Mechanicking was not my thing. Or engineering was not my thing. And, you know, I remember, you know, Charlie would be, you know, kind of forcing me or showing me what to do or explaining things. I'd have no interest. Like, I'd have just no interest whatsoever. And I think they put it down to laziness, but maybe there's a touch of laziness too, you know. I just had no interest in the mechanical side.
But sometimes it can just be pure passion for the drive. You know how the thing works, and you just want to see it.
Yeah. Well, when I was, I would say 13, 14, I think it was, the Cortina was replaced by the Ford Sierra. I think it was maybe 13 or 14. But you could look it up whatever year the Ford Sierra came out, and you could work out what age I was. But my dad got a few brand new ones, and he had sold one of them to a school teacher in Riverstown. He always sold her new cars. But the car came in, and of course I had to get driving it around the garage, and there was a blanket of snow this particular day, and of course the handbrake on a brand new car was 2 clicks, like, you know. And that's where I started mastering my handbrake turns and my drifting. And I can remember those days as well as I'm sitting on this couch. And that memory is what sticks out on my early teens, you know, drifting brand new cars around the garage. When you think about it, it wasn't wise, you know.
Madness.
Those were the things that made everything else go away. And, you know, as I said, the troubled times that was in it, that's where I got my happiness out of. And every new car that came about the place, or every car that I'd never driven before, you know, I seen it being traded in, or my dad bought it in. I couldn't wait to get my hands on the steering wheel of it. I couldn't wait to jump behind the wheel. And in fairness to him, he you know, there was a little bit of curtailment, but not a lot, you know.
Yeah, and I mean it's nurturing that, really, isn't it? It's nurturing somebody's flair, and it's, you know, I remember speaking to somebody recently who was talking about, when the word creativity was mentioned to me, my whole life I would have thought like an artist or a writer or something, but they kind of turned it on its head and spoke about driving, and sort of said that driving is a place where you can, you know, express yourself or get your creative side out and do things like that, and through driving. And it sort of changed my whole view on it, because when you were describing the snow and the drifting, like, it's genuinely, well, first of all, the skill and being able to actually do that and control the car, but particularly with snow, I just have this beautiful image of like, like the actual sliding and the movements of a car. Like that is,
It's like
such
belly
a beautiful
dancing or
thing.
ice skating or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
what
But
happened, in terms
it's
of your rally driving then, like, did you kind of decide at that point, like, I have to drive, I just love driving, and no matter what now I have to do it? Or was there a moment then when you realized, right, no,
oh
do you
God,
know what,
no,
if
there
I can
was
just drive as much?
no, there was never a light bulb moment.
Right.
It's only looking back on it that I know that that's where I was, finding this thing that made me tick. Only looking back at the time when I was living it, I was never saying to myself, "Oh, I want to be a rally driver." I had no ambitions to be a
Yeah.
rally driver, or no ambitions to even compete, or get into that sort of thing. Because as I said, not a lot of people would actually believe me when I say that I'm actually quite shy and quite inward to myself, and I find it difficult. I find it very difficult to be in public in one sense, but it's funny with
Yeah.
motorsport. I'm getting off the track a wee bit, but in motorsport, there's such a community feeling, and there's nobody there watching a rally that doesn't respect everybody that they're with, and respect the people that are
Yeah.
driving and the people that are standing beside them on the ditch. And I found that pretty right away when I started to compete. But going back to your question, no, I never felt any ambition when I was young. This is what a career I wanted. I actually had no idea what I was going to do. And I
Yeah.
worried quite a lot about that because I struggled with school. And fortunately enough, I was quite good with the business side of things. But again, I think my early teens, I struggled with finding direction. And I know my dad was very good, but Charlie was particularly cruel but kind in a lot of ways. My brother Charlie, and
Yeah.
he tried his best to steer me. But it soon turned out that I had no interest in any kind of a career working at cars or anything like that, or even in the garage. I was more tended towards the shop and the filling station that we had, and at a very young age, I started taking control of that, and my mum had been
Yeah.
running it, so I started to take it over and work on that and build that up. And that seemed to be the path that I was going down. Look, I had part-time jobs. I had part-time jobs from driving a mineral lorry till tried my hand at welding, and just
Aye.
different things that I did when I was a cub. But no, I was always steered back towards the business aspect. Like buying and
Yeah.
selling and
Yeah.
running the garage, running the shop, and running the filling station. The driving had never come into it until Charlie started. And I was
Okay.
only, I was quite young when he started. Like I was 16 or 17. And it was him that gave me the inspiration to get behind the wheel and go rally.
Brilliant. And in terms of, the rally, and then, like, what kept you at it? Was it that adrenaline that you mentioned earlier? Was it that pure love
I
and thrill of it?
I was at the Galway Rally there recently, and I was sitting in with my friend Liam Egan, and we were running right down at the back of the field. And on the Sunday, there was a bit of a delay to one of the stages, and I got out, and there was these two fellas, and they were in a twin cam, and we were having a bit of crack, and the conversation came up, and there was actually quite a few lads around. There were several fellas from the UK, and they were in their historic cars, which, by the way, I really admire those guys and the way they turned those cars out. But we were having the conversation, and he says, one of the guys, the guy at the twin cam turner, and he says to me along the lines, he said, doesn't matter about the wages getting paid on Friday, doesn't matter about the lorry breaking down, doesn't matter about trying to find the money to put the diesel in on Monday morning, it doesn't matter about the load that wasn't lifted, and it doesn't matter about the bill not getting paid. But he says, we'll all be rallying. We'll do everything we can to get to the rally and get to the event. And that really resonated with me, because whenever I started, there was no turning off the tap. And
Yeah.
the adrenaline, and then the social aspect of it as well really took me out of my skin, took me out of a bit of my shyness. And I found that side of it, being a young fella, being 18 or 19 years of age, I think I did my first rally when I was 17 or something like that. And that was, that was just, I couldn't get over it. Like, I couldn't get over the adrenaline rush. I did my first rally and I finished it, which was the Cavan Stages in 1986, I think it was. No, in 1984.
84,
anyway,
was it?
84, I think it was. And,
Yeah.
that whole buzz and that whole adrenaline rush just was like a drug. Like, it was just like, I never did drugs, but I can only imagine that high, that buzz that you just, it's addictive. It's totally addictive.
It is,
100%
and
addictive.
it's so hard to word. And that's reminding me whenever you're explaining that, kind of the age old question: what came first, the chicken or the egg? What do you think came first? Like, do you think you were destined to rally, and it just took you whatever length of time it took you to find the driving, and then as soon as you got into the car and you started driving, it all clicked? Or do you think Eugene as a person was formed and then rallying came in and just sort of changed things? Which do you think happened first? Do you think like it was in you and no matter how long it took you, you're always going to find it? Or it just changed you because you met rallying, it changed who you were completely?
Oh, well, there's no doubt about it. If I had never got into the car to compete, I'd be a very different person today, obviously. Motorsport completely changed my life and put me in a direction that, well, let me explain it this way. The first couple of years, there was no results. Like I was just an Ulster-ran. I drove around and I had a bit of fun. And the social aspect of it, as they really clicked with me. And it's where I would have met, a lot of friends and would have met friends that I've had for the rest of my life. But my best friend in the world, who I would have known from I was a kid, him and I really got into it, and he helped prepare the car at the beginning. And he was one of these sort of guys that was extremely talented. He's a really good looking fella and he always got all the women, but that's social aspect to him as well. And him and I just had some fabulous times going to rallies, and a couple of other friends, that came along with us. And the first rally I ever won was the Lanes Rally in Marfelt Motor Club, Lanes Rally. And I bought a car of Kieran Shaw, I think it was, or Kevin Shaw. And him and I put this engine into it, and I'm sorry, another fella, Brian McGuigan. And that was the first rally I won, and he sat with me. So you can imagine the euphoria that we had, and the excitement that we had, and the celebrations, the local rally. We were only, we were 19 at the time.
Yeah,
and
camaraderie.
And that happened in September '86, and unfortunately, him and I and three other of our friends were travelling to Cookstown on 19th of December 1986, and a drunk driver hit his head on, and he was killed. And that, that absolutely, completely shook my world. That was just like cut an arm off, And then the fact that we had been rallying and we had been successful, the local community, they kind of, I know this was going on, that, it was said that we were rallying and we were flying and the accident was our fault and it was my fault. And, I had to carry the stigma of that for a while. And I wasn't going to get into the car again. I had no interest in getting back into the car again. But obviously Charlie and my brother Peter and my brother Jim, God rest him, they didn't force me, but left it. They showed me a path, and got me encouraged to get back in. And I think the first rally I did after his death was the Ballycastle single venue, Ballycastle Forest, which is a wee tarmac rally.
Yeah.
And I do remember, you know, I remember finishing the rally and feeling that lift, you know, that adrenaline rush
Yeah.
again, and that self-satisfaction. And I think we did pretty well in the event as well, like maybe in the top 10 or something, which was good for what,
Amazing,
you
yeah.
know, for her experience and where I was at my age at that time. And to be fair, you know, that was starting to open up a few doors. You know, there was opportunities, you know, that I think I could have pursued. But like I couldn't really describe. You know, I couldn't really describe that. The sport helped me back from that tragedy.
Yeah.
And I was just starting to get. This is going to sound terrible, but I was just starting to get back on my feet again and started getting getting a life again, and starting to get a bit of normality when my brother died, and that he died in January 1988. So Aidan died in December 86. Jim died in January 88. So it was a year and a month between the two of them.
It's
And
a tough period of time.
And it was particularly tragic, like, because my
Yeah.
brother took his wife and his 3 kids with him. So it was absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, again, the stigma that was attached to the family, the stigma that was attached to, you know, my dad and my mum. And, you know, 88 was an extremely, extremely tough year. But again, motorsport prevailed and people rallied around us, both Charlie and myself. And
Yeah.
we had a fantastic show in that year in 88 in June. The two of us went to the Donegal Rally, and 2 cars painted similarly. His car was a BDA Escort, and the car I had was the 2-litre Escort that I had a bit of success with. And unfortunately, the build up to the event was fantastic because, as I say, everybody supported us and
Yeah.
you know, got us into a good mind frame. Whereas the event, you know, the first day I think Charlie was laying 5th or 6th overall, and I was just outside the top 10. And the second day everything went wrong. He put it off on Fannet Head, and I had a clutch problem, which was terminal. And that was the power of the sport to bring us back from a very, you know, a couple of very tragic events,
Yeah.
and give us a bit of direction in our life outside of,
Yeah.
you know, normal living. And as I say, nobody, you know, looking back at it, there's times I don't know how we got through it, but
Yeah.
definitely motorsport played a huge part in it, and played a huge part in, you know, stabilizing our lives and giving us
Yeah.
friends that, as I say, have been there all our lives, and friends that even to this day, you know, when I go to a rally, there's people I've known for the last 30, 40 years, will always come over and have a chat to you, and you know, those people give you a lift. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I say I was recently at Galway, and the amount of people that just come over to say hello,
Yeah.
genuinely, not because Eugene Donnelly, the rally driver, but because Eugene Donnelly, the person. They were
Yeah,
genuinely
exactly.
coming over and having a conversation about things other than rallying. You know,
Yeah.
you normally, you know, you do get the people who, oh, you know, you're great in the Corolla and you're great when you won this rally and blah, blah, blah. But it very quickly moves away from that. The conversation usually moves very, very quickly from the event to other day-to-day things or other happenings, or,
Yeah.
you know, maybe concern about somebody to hear wasn't well, or, you know, some other piece of information, or some other topic of conversation,
Yeah.
which, if you think about it, that's that, you know, the sport has brought me those type of people and those type of friends who have massively supported me through my life.
It truly does, you know, that's the beautiful thing about this sport. And I think, what event was it that you and I were on and we spoke last year? I think the Ulster maybe, and that's actually, you know, you and I were having a conversation about how, I mean, rallying, it's the best thing in the world, but what's beautiful about it is that, you know, there's so much more to it than just the driving. I mean, the driving's amazing, but like it's that sense of family and camaraderie. And I mean, you've mentioned the social side of it a few times, and you know, you've mentioned family and stuff. And I keep thinking back to like your early days in Draperstown, like that sense of community and family. And that's, it sounds like that's kind of what you found in rallying, the thing that you had been missing from Draperstown when you came back into the community feeling of rallying. That's when everything kind of sat with you.
Well, you know, going back to the Draperstown situation, like we lived right beside my uncle and his family, and there was 11 of them, I think, and or sorry, 9 of them. And you can imagine, I grew up with my cousins, and you know, there was other cousins of mine lived in the town and around the area, so I was regularly seeing family. And then I had my friends from primary school, and I was regularly seeing them. Because back in the days around Riverstown, even at 5 or 6 years of age, you know, there was no fear of getting abducted, a kid getting abducted. You could walk between your friends' houses, you could go for a ride on the bicycle down the street. You had that sort of community warmth and security. And definitely when I moved to Mahara, I didn't have that. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think not consciously, but subconsciously, there was a thing there where I was just drawn towards the sport and drawn towards, you know, that whole community spirit and that whole being a part of something. And when you went to events, you know, if you were, you could go to one event and meet 4 or 5 guys that was completing in front of you or behind you. They ended up friends. They ended up people you knew. You go to the next event, might be 5 or 10 different guys. And that just went on. And then you kept meeting them again at certain events. And that just went on till it just grew into, as you say, a connection with people who had a love for a sport that you had a love for. So therefore you had something in common. And, you know, you ended up, we all know the social aspect of it. Like, and in the old days, you know, when I was rallying, we went to the rally as much for the crack the night before and the prize given afterwards as we did to go rallying, because I'm ashamed to say many a morning I was kicked out of bed and had to get a box of Anadin in me and try to get the head straight after the night before to get into a rally car. You know? You wouldn't do it today.
No.
But I remember Matt Doherty, past COC of Donegal Motor Club. I was doing the Sligo rally. And the Sligo used to always have a great party. We were in the bar, myself and my old co-driver Roger Whiteside were in the bar at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I think somebody was up on top of a piano singing, and the crack was just 90. And Matt came down the stairs and caught the two of us by the ears and walked us up the stairs and into the room and effed the head of us to get into bed and get some sleep because we were rallying the next day. Oh, stop.
My God,
when I think
that's a story and a half now.
Well, there's a bit more to it than that too. But, you know, that's the sort of thing that, you know, when I was going back home, like I wouldn't have went out much. Do you know what I mean? Between the rallies, I wouldn't have socialised a lot, you know. And that's the sort of thing you looked forward to because you knew those nights were going to be brilliant. And then you did the rally, you had the adrenaline rush, and if you got a result, great. If you didn't get a result, it didn't really matter because everybody piled back in for the prize given. And I don't know what it was about those days. People weren't as conscious about going home. If they went to a rally, they stayed over. Well, Sligo was always on a bank holiday, I think, anyway. Well, a bank holiday for the north. But a lot of the events, people just, they didn't go home, or locals, you know, supported it. Whereas you don't get that now, you know, you don't even hardly more the prize givens now, you know. So
I know.
That's the aspect of it that I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed, and never really thought about, you know, any kind of success as being making driving as a career or anything like that. I just worked hard at the business. Had plenty of rows with my brothers in how to do things, and plenty of rows with Charlie and the money that we were spending going rallying. But you know, I always used to say to Charlie, "Sure, we have our whole life to pay for this." Like, you know, at the end of the day, this is what we love, you know. And he would have been very very conscious about the financial side of it, whereas I had the blasé attitude if I've got it in my pocket, I'll spend it on
Yeah.
motorsport, and next week I'll make it. And I
Yeah.
always had that attitude, and that stuck by me. Well, I've had a couple of downturns, put it like that, in my financial career, which is probably fairly well known too. But the point about it is that in them days when you were young, it was the thing that I latched on to go and enjoy life and enjoy as a young person, and especially with the tragedies that we had and trying to put that behind us.
Yeah. And it's like, I'd say with those tragedies, you probably had, there's probably a moment of realizing your own mortality. But with that, you get this new lease on life where you think, well, this could be all over at any moment, and it's all about enjoying life and having fun and feeling good. And if you feel good, surrounded by people that you would consider family, and you're having good crack before and after the events, and you're enjoying every moment in the car, it just seems like a perfect recipe for life, really.
Well, as they said at the time my brother died, we should have all went and got some sort of therapy, because it was a huge tragedy, and I'm not reluctant to talk about it, but at the end of the day, people don't want to know that stuff. Like, at the end of the day, it's a part of, these things happen in life, and they happen to people, not to everybody, but it happens. And I suppose, like, my brother was buried on my 21st birthday, like the day I turned 21, his funeral was. And, probably for 10 years, I really struggled with it. And the only release was getting into the car and going to those events. Whereas the other stuff was, difficult. You had to work, and had to work in a difficult enough environment, and had to grow up very, very fast. And there was a point that, I went to the States for a couple of years, probably in my early 20s. I went maybe when I was 22 or 3 for a couple of years. So I had no motorsport. And I have to admit, like, the States was tough. Like, it was very, very difficult. I had a great job there, and, that side of it was good, but, I suppose the loneliness of it, and it was different because, you met some people there and I had some friends there, but it was really, really difficult. It wasn't the same, and I couldn't satisfy that itch, and I could find nothing to, ease the pain as such.
Yeah.
And when I come back out of America, I just put my head down and I said, right, okay, I bought the business off my dad, and I said, right, I'm going to make a success of this. And I worked extremely hard at it, night and day, just knocked down the whole premises, rebuilt it all in the new, and built the thing up. I remember we opened the garage, and I opened the garage in September '93. It was a state-of-the-art filling station with a shop, and it was a workshop there and stuff. And it started to do well, and I said, right, now that that's done, I'm going back rallying. And I kind of started buying at cars, doing a rally with them and selling them.
Yes.
And that then brought me into the fraternity as well. And Barry now is a very successful business. Him and I came together and we formed a wee business or a wee company. And I used to buy the cars, bring them in. Barry, he would work in the workshop. Either we'd tart them up for sale, or we'd split them up and brack them and sell off the parts. And that then funded the rallying as well as the other business. And that's whenever, I started to do pretty well. I had a couple of escorts that did well, and along came the famous G3, which started to get massive results with. So, from a mental point of view, them 10 years, from I was 19 till I was 28 or 29, I was kind of a bit of no man's land, bit of motorsport, but not really. And it was only when I came back out of America and I said, right, get my head down here, build this business up, and get stuck into the sport that I love.
Yeah.
And the rally, the rally sales side of things was, I was totally to fund my own sport, and to be around those people, and again, sold quite a few cars over the space of 2 or 3 years when I was doing that. Some of them went on to be very successful cars. Some of them turned out to not be so successful. You can gain a lot of enemies that way too, because you don't know what you're selling. Back then, it was a Mark II Escort, there was a Pinto engine in it, there was a Quaife box, but you couldn't tell what was in it, like, or how many miles they'd done or anything. So some of them weren't so successful, and would it have been 50-50? Probably 50 good cars were sold and 50 bad cars were sold.
Yeah.
But that was a great feeling being involved in the sport from that angle. But it's different.
Well, you mentioned therapy there. And it's one of those things where if what happened to you in those early days were to happen now, you would absolutely, probably go down the therapy route, or it would certainly be suggested to you. And honestly, I can vouch for therapy. I've been doing it for years, and it genuinely is life-changing. And one of the things that I actually have realized through my own therapy journey is that rallying, funnily enough, it probably sounds absolutely insane to say, but I had a very busy head. Like, my mind just never stops. I am always thinking, and I know everybody's the same to a certain extent, but mine is just, it just seems to be, incessant. And you would kind of think the mayhem of a rally car, or the scariness of a rally car would sort of send that into overdrive. But one of the things that I realized through therapy is that the only time that I had genuine peace in my life was when I was driving like a crazy Egypt down the roads as quick as I could, because I had to be so present. You couldn't think or worry about anything else because there was too much at stake. And so it was one of those things where it sounds mad, but it's genuinely where I had so much solace and peace from my mind and my worries.
I can relate to that. All right. And it's very hard for a layperson or anybody that has not competed in a rally car. It's very, very difficult for them to understand that.
Yeah.
It's like I say, your man standing on the side of the road in Galway the other day, and his other point was when he gets in and puts the helmet on, all them worries are gone. That's his therapy. And there's not a thing in his head, only drive that car to the best of his ability, listen till his pace notes, and enjoy the spin. Like, sit back and enjoy it.
That's exactly it. Like, that is a therapy. And back in the 80s, I mean, I'm very lucky in the time that I grew up that I was kind of able to just, whatever stigma is attached to therapy, I was able to just put that aside. And it was very little, I suppose, whenever I started. But I would imagine back in the 80s, it wasn't the done thing, but you had to find a therapeutic outlet somewhere.
Well, that was exactly my next point. Like, if you went to, if you went and seek therapy, or went to a shrink, as they call them, or people said you were mad, or you were, well, your man's not wise in the head, or he's screwed up, like. So there was a bit of stigma to that, all right. But I suppose, later in life, I always quote the one from the line from Crocodile Dundee, and your woman says, do you not have shrinks or, psychiatrists in Australia? And your man's Crocodile Dundee turns around and he says, no, you tell Wally, and Wally tells everybody else, and you have no problem,
Mick knew what he was talking about.
A lot, I've used that in a lot. But look, everybody's, I suppose, as life has changed, and the stigma of things have changed. I think, seeking help is now, it's now the norm. Back in those days, it wasn't the norm. And I never really felt, I don't know, I can't explain it. I couldn't say that if somebody had said to me, oh, you need to go to therapy, I would have went. But it never was really suggested that I can remember that I was forced to do it.
It wouldn't have been the norm.
Go. No, but I'm sure, I do know that it was mentioned, and I do know that I always think to myself, no, I don't want that on my medical record, that I seek help, all that sort of thing. I do remember thinking about that, but it's gone back to your point. The therapy of motorsport is it's just, it's like lads playing football. Like, it's like lads
Yeah.
playing, anybody playing any sport, they seek a sanctuary in it. I'll tell you a good one. Back in 2005, and it was the Galway Rally that I've just recently was at, brought this up. One of the stages that we did in 2005 was done there in the recent rally. And I recognised it instantly as I pulled up to do the recce. I went, holy shit, this stage was ran in 2005. And we were fortunately leading the rally. And Paul Kelly and myself, as you know, or as anybody who follows the sport, him and I have been great friends before we ever rallied together. We were really good friends. Met through rally, but we never connected as a team till later in the years, But we pulled up to the start of this stage, and we were leading the rally, and it was the second day, and it was a nice, crisp winter morning with the sun shining. And there was a delay at the start of the stage. We were sitting inside the car. We were in the Corolla, and it was lovely and warm. And the car was just sitting idling, and it might have been 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And I just put my head back, and the helmet and all on, balaclava, suit all done up, belts all on. And I put my head back on the back of the seat of the car, and it just felt so cozy and so just at home, and no thought about what anything else was going on around me. And I closed my eyes, and I fell fast asleep. And I mean fast asleep, to the point that whenever we were ready to go, he had to nudge me. He had to waken me. And he says, are you sleeping? And I said, geez, where am I? And I had to look around for a second. And then I realised, flipping hell, start line of the second day at the Galway International Rally. And he just looked at me and he goes, flipping hell, like, how did you do that? Now, since that, I've discovered that he's found the power of doing it, because a particular driver that he has been sitting with recently told me that on a road section he fell asleep. So there's been
Not ideal.
There's been something I've taught him.
I know, but it just goes to show you the comfort in the car.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And
that feeling
as
of
I
hope.
said earlier, I was in the car with Liam Egan, and we did Galway Rally recently, and I was just saying to him how comfortable we put new seats in the car for this year and stuff, and I was just, how comfortable the car is to sit in, and the seat snug, and you just feel at home in the thing, and you just feel there's a whole world outside there, and I'm in here, and it doesn't matter about it,
it feels like home.
It might sound stupid, and people might not believe me, but trust me, inside that thing, when you're so comfortable like that, there's no feeling like it.
No, I completely understand it. Like, it's like a wee safety blanket or bubble that, although now there's an awful lot of nerves can be flying around in there too, but there's just something about it where you feel like you're home.
Yeah.
And with all that, Eugene, like when you think about, like when I think about your career, like I was only born in the 80s, so, and when I was starting rallying, you were obviously like absolutely flying at that point, and really coming into those big years in your sort of driving career. But like for so many years, you had such peace and such such a beautiful sense of home and family and stuff within the rally and community, and even within the rally car. Like, how did you then go from that to what I would imagine was wildly pressurized in those kind of early noughties, and when the major success and sort of all those wins were coming your way? Like, did it change for you at all at that point in your own mind?
Certainly. I mean, well, certainly, it's unprecedented success that I never believed that I could achieve. As I said, I never, I won a few small events, like localized club events. I'd won Monaghan stages in '89, I think it was, which was massive. Like, that was a huge event to win.
Yeah.
But I won it kind of by default, because I think Vincent Bonner was doing the rally, and I can't remember who else. I think there was one or two other big names, and they all broke down or crashed out, and it was an awful wet day. I was in the right car, and my times would have been good. I probably would have been fifth or sixth anyway, but a big part of the field had fell out, and the rally came to me, and I won it. But that success, you never think, oh, I can go on to win a Northern Ireland Championship, or I can go on to win a Forestry Championship, or any of these types of things. So I said, in whatever year it was, 98 or 97, 98, I said, I would really love to win, the Border Championship, or win my class in the Border Championship.
Yeah.
And that was the first step. A class was achievable. And I knew most of the guys, like, there was Niall Maguire and people like that there, and I knew, everybody's good drivers, but I had always this wee thing in my head, I could maybe beat them, And sure enough, that's where I set my first goal. But much more after that there, no, I didn't, never thought about it. Never thought that it could ever get to any kind of success that I had. And, behind the scene, there was obviously the businesses and my family, and, I got married, and I had a couple of kids, and, all of that stuff was going on. And then as you get a bit older, you get conscious about the dangers as well. And there was a couple of tragedies, a couple of lads got, a couple of fatalities in sport, and, you're thinking about that, but it goes back to the same thing. You get into the car, and when you're in the car, that just goes out the window. The risk, the fear factor, the nerves is obviously there, because I think being nervous at the start of a rally is a good thing, because it leaves you that you're not being wild, like, the risk involved in it. And those type of things, you kind of, when you got in the car, you left everything, your troubles behind you. And as I say, I had two young kids whenever I started driving that G3, and that was the late 90s. And when I came on into buying the first 4-wheel drive car, and it really then, it started to get serious. And for whatever reason, I was in a really good place in 99, 2000, 2001. I'd sold off the business, did very well out of that. I had started another business, and it was doing extremely well. And I just got myself into a really good position. And I had a nice home, and, the family was well provided for. And I just got into a really good position that I said, right, okay, I won a Border Championship. Maybe I could win the Border Championship outright. Then the next stepping stone was, a National Forestry Championship or the Northern Ireland Championship. And these were the goals that I had set myself. And, I was fortunate enough that, I had the businesses that I had were fit to fund that, and I had good sponsorship at the time, and that started to grow. And that brought you into a place of comfort that, you're really, really comfortable doing what you were doing, and there was no real stress financially, which was the key part of it, because we're all driven by our finances. And outside of that there, family life, I would say it wasn't, it was like my kids and everything was brilliant, but the sport was definitely taking a bit of a toll on my marriage, but also on, my family, with my mum and my dad, and the rest of my siblings. I wouldn't have been seeing them as much, and I was, I'm away rallying. In fairness, Charlie and I are very close, and he would have attended a lot of events with me, and I would have went with him to rally. So that bond and that brotherly thing really, really cemented itself through those years. And while I think, I don't think Charlie was ever envious or jealous of me, but I'm sure he looked at me and going, I would love to have the carefree spirit that he has way off rallying. But Charlie didn't realise what was going on in the background. I was like a duck on water, behind the scenes. I'd be pedaling, and, you come home from a rally on a Sunday night, Monday morning, bang, I was away at work, and I was pedaling like Billy O till, do well enough, provide for everybody, make sure everything was paid, and get the money for the next rally, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that is just such an intense, you know, what you're after describing there. It's such an intense amount of pressure. And at that point, did the joy of rallying leave you at all, or was the rallying like still your only place of solace?
Well, like I explained earlier, there was the social aspect to it, and through those years with, you know, through 88 or sorry 98, 99, 2000 with you know with the G3 and with, you know, I had a BDA escort which I did the farce, and you know I think I bought the Sleek around 2001, but my other best friend was Glenn Allen. So Glenn and I would have went to a lot of events together, and we would have partied a lot, and
Yeah.
we would have had a massive social life outside of the events, and that, you know, that was a trigger that, you know, kept me going back to events. Like if Glenn was going
Yeah.
to do an event at that time, and I wasn't doing it, I would have went with them, not
Yeah.
because of the rally or to watch the rally. I had no interest in looking at the rally. As a matter of fact, watching rallying to me is like watching paint dry, standing on the ditch. Like I just would have no real interest in it. I enjoy watching it on Facebook or on TV or whatever, but no real interest in standing in the ditch watching the car go woo, woo. You know,
Yeah.
it's not for me. But you know, those years we just had so much crack, like, and we had so much fun. But then it started to get serious around 2001 when I decided to make a play, you know, for the Forestry Championship, and that's where Paul Nagel and I teamed up, and I think we came second. I think we came second in it in 2001. I think it was 2002 we won the Forestry Championship, and again that started changing things massively because Philip Moynihan of Ears Motorsport. I started to get to know Philip very well, and Philip and David became very, very good friends, but massive supporters of what I was doing by Kumo through Kumo Tires.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was the first. You know, that was really the first any kind of financial support in any kind of big way came from those guys, and
Yeah.
we started helping them develop the tire, and you know, they got us support through Kumo, and we went on and won the Forestry Championship, as I say, the Northern Ireland Championship, and eventually the 2003 National Championship. And we had some success in the international rallies as well. You know, on the Tarmac Championship. I think we finished second in Donegal in 2003 on Kumo tires, and that rally would not have happened without Philip Moynihan. And again, I think we went to Jim Clark that year and we finished fourth or fifth. We had been leading or we had been second or third in the Circuit of Ireland, and I crashed the car out. And you know, there was a lot of momentum getting behind it, and you know, as I say, Philip was there. There was several other people then started to get involved, and seen a bit of potential with me, and then that brought a seriousness to it, and that's when you had to go, right, shit, the partying has to stop. You know, I have to, if I want to achieve this, or you know, is there an ambition in me to achieve it? And I think by the fact that we finished second in Donegal with no real ambitions to go after a Tarmac Championship, we had finished whatever fourth or fifth in Jim Clark. We went then and did the end of 2003. We did the Galway West Rally in a hired Subaru of Stan Harper, and we won that rally. And that was really the cementing home. Shit, there's a possibility I could be good enough to compete with the guys at the top level of the sport.
And was that your light bulb moment, Eugene? Because you remember earlier on you were saying you didn't really have one, but in terms of it going seriously then and kind of taking yourself seriously and thinking, God, I could actually do something here. I could really get behind myself and achieve something here.
Well, I think it was Philip Moynihan and Paul Cayley and Charlie and Derek McGeehan. They were the people that installed the idea, and they didn't say it outright, like, but they all were, you know, dropping subtle hints, and maybe they didn't
Yeah.
even realize they were doing that, like.
I know.
But that kind of, if there was ever a light bulb moment, that was it. But
Yeah.
I still went ahead and, you know, purchased the Corolla in late 2003 for the start of the 2004 championship. And I was in a good position financially fit to do that. Now I struggled to run the car, but I knew that the momentum was there to get the sponsorship to do that, which we did. But did I think I would go out and be as successful as I was? I hope. Like, I thought if we went round into the championship year one and finished in the top 5, that'd be a great achievement. And maybe got a couple of good results, maybe a couple of podiums that year. I thought that's as much as I'm going to get out of this. But the real thing was we had invested a lot of money in it. Everybody was behind it. There was a team now starting to be built around it. And that team then, I felt, you know, I was the controller of it. And therefore I had to do my best and not let them down. And that's why all the socializing around the events had to stop. Barring the prize givings at the end of every event was always a big thing, you know. But, you know, the parties leading up to it, the parties during it, that all had to stop.
No more Matt Doherty pulling you by the ear.
No, that all had to stop. But yeah, that's as I say, if there was ever a light bulb moment, that's when it happened that, you know, I had to say, right, okay, I have to take this serious. And again, Paul was a fantastic support. Now, it's only in recent years him and I would have talked about it, and I didn't realize, you know, he was apprehensive. Like, you know, it wasn't just straightforward for him. Like, he was carrying a lot on his shoulders, but he came across to me as he was the man in control, not me. He knew what to say. He knew, you know, he organized everything. I kind of just turned up, like, you know. And it was whenever we were talking about, you know, as I say, years later, you know, the vulnerability of where he was at has only been coming to light, like, and as he had a big job, like, and then when we started to, you know, we started to get results. Well, that was a bit mind blowing, and you know, I'm sure people, and I know now, looking back at it, what effect that had me. That freaking blew my head up, like, you know. Sorry for my language, but you know, I'm not afraid to say it. I got big headed, like. I was going around flipping hell, I can win rallies, like, you know. Oh, sure, I'm the best, and I'm the bee's knees, like, you know. And you can't not be affected by, you know, big results, like, and beating, you know, beating the best in the game, like, you know, you beat. The guy won Killarney in 2003, and you know, we beat a serious field of cars, like, and. Going into the last 2 stages, I was up against the 5-time champion at the time, Austin McHale, and the main games were flat out, even though we weren't even talking to each other. But your mind was running away with you. Here, I won Killarney, and he went off in the second last stage, and I cruised home, got out and sprayed the champagne, and had a massive party. But driving up the road from Killarney that following day, I mean, the head was here, like, you know.
I can only imagine.
But it does affect you, like, and there's no point in saying it doesn't. Like, you know?
Do you think that made you a better driver, though, or did it affect your driving? You know, do you think like, you know, people that are competing at the highest level in their sport need a huge ego to kind of keep them there, or do you think at some stage you will have to humble yourself if you want to stay there?
I think that my natural thoughts about it. My aspirations was never too big, and I think that's what kept my feet on the ground as far as, you know, being motivated, and as far as getting into the zone. My aspirations never was. I don't think I ever went to a rally and said, I have to win this rally. I don't think, as a matter of fact, I know I never did that. Maybe other people in the team said, oh, we're here to win, but Eugene Donnelly never said that. Now, when you'd be maybe interviewed, or some fella, you're going to win this weekend. Aye, right. But that wasn't coming from my head. That was just coming from the gob, like, you know, and satisfying somebody who was, you know, having the crack with you. But not in my head that I ever go to a rally and say, we have to win this. Paul and I had a very good relationship. There was unspoken things. You know, we didn't have to talk about things. We go, we do the recce. And there's times I could say we didn't put enough effort into our recce's, and therefore we were punished on the rally because the result didn't come.
Yeah.
But there was times we went to an event and I knew we need to do a really good recce here. We need to put the hours into this. We need to put the work into it. And Paul would know, he would just sense it from me. He's on a bit of a mission here, and he would just go with it. And those were the events that we always did very, very well on. But my mindset was never, I need to achieve this or I need to win this. And it was never about, I'm going to win a Tarmac Championship. At the beginning, the aspirations weren't that great. But when I won it once, I said, right, okay. And if you remember, I won it through, again, controversial circumstances, which really was a bit of a main job. But yeah, when you won it once, then you get your head and you say, oh, maybe I could do this again,
And at that point, is that what kind of keeps driving you? Not anybody else, but your literal competition of your own mind, kind of saying, because you know the way, like, you can do something once and your mind can jump in and say, that was a fluke, or you got lucky, or, but when you can do it consistently, that's when you start to believe in yourself.
Yeah, no, you're right. But what did I say to you at the start? This game is an addiction. It's a drug, like. So when you get, one of the biggest accolades, the euphoria from that, the standing up and receiving that trophy and feeling, the accolades and, the people supporting you and people genuinely delighted for you. And you can see it, like, you can see it in people's eyes, like, you can feel it, you can feel that aura, like, it's a drug. It's absolutely 100%. It's a drug, like, and it's addictive.
And do you think that's the addiction then that kept you going? Yeah. So
absolutely.
that's
yeah. Once I won the first one, there was no going back. Like.
And it is just that again, like, to me, I don't know why, but it's just coming back into my mind. Is that it's that, like, this lovely image of kind of like, you mentioned the people being delighted for you, and there's just a feeling and a strong aura around the whole thing. And again, it just kind of, it feels like that. It feels like that sense of family and that sense of joy that you would have had in your early days back in Draperstown. Like, and I wonder, is it that feeling that just always kept you, sort of, was that your anchor, or was that your, your true north?
Well, again, it's different for everybody. Some people are driven very much by being competitive and, their competitive spirits. And I think in my case, it wasn't so much about my competitiveness. It was more about a release or something else to replace some of the bad memories and some of the bad things that I had went through in my life. And like, I'm a great believer in yin and yang. Someone is a very good friend of mine at the moment, and I'm saying this to them all the time. To have the good times, you have to have the bad ones. And I look back at it, and I know that, I had the yin and I had the really, really bad times, like, probably, as bad as anybody could experience. But I had some of the most euphoric moments through the sport and through the wins that I had, and going from that first championship, which ended very, very controversial, and my personal life was dragged into that. I actually don't know, like, for anybody who's listening, the brief on it is on the last round of the championship, we were sabotaged and crashed out of the rally. There was material put on the road to make the car crash off the road, and very lucky none of the two of us was hurt, myself or Paul. And I still can't level with that. Like, was it a fellow competitor? Was it something else outside of motorsport? I don't know. Like, all sorts of conspiracy theories were floating about, but nobody ever got to the bottom of it. And I had to live with that, and I had to say, well, the police, there was a big investigation done. They couldn't get to the bottom of it. There was a load of people interviewed. Nobody had any sort of indication or evidence why somebody would go to a remote place, plant material on the ground after the previous car had gone through, so that I would come along, hit the material, and crash the car. And like this happened at
And how did
100
that
mile
make
an
you
hour.
not lose trust in the sport and everything to do with it? You know, because it automatically, I would think that that would take away my feeling of safety that you had had for so many years within the sport and within the rally car.
Well, no, there was some battle went on in my head from that happened at the end of October. Oh, sorry, at the beginning of October in 2004. The first rally again was the beginning of February. So you were talking 4 months between that particular event happening and me getting back into a car. And I can tell you those 4 months were extremely difficult. Extremely difficult because we didn't know why it happened. Extremely difficult because we'd won a championship, but because of the controversial circumstances, the way that the powers to be, and I think my team had something to do with it, it was decided the rally would be cut short till the previous control, which meant the rally was actually being won by me, and I would have then won that particular championship outright. But it was felt unanimously, it was felt that because Derek McGarty was leading the rally, or would have won the rally if the results had stood with my accident and me getting out of the rally, he would have won the championship. So by cutting the rally short, I won the rally, and I'm listed as the rally winner in 2004. But it was decided that the championship would be shared because of the unprecedented events, and because nobody could get to the bottom of it, and it was decided, well, the championship would be split. So there was no protest against the result of the rally, and there was no protest against the results of the championship, and everything moved forward. But the other big thing about it was, at the time, the sport was in a great place. Like, it was getting great momentum. The viewing figures from the RPM programs were just through the roof. It was getting great press, media, in the printed press, and it was really starting. Motorsport was really starting to get second wind again, because it was very popular through the 70s and 80s, and then it had took a big dive in the 90s. Tarmac Championship rallying did. And then, I had a couple of conversations with people that were very influential in the sport, in the different organizations, and they were explaining, if this particular issue is really highlighted, we could have a huge problem here with the sport. And the huge problem would be is that this is highlighted a massive risk factor, that individuals can actually place stuff on the road quite easily and cause very, very serious accidents. So those are the type of conversations that we're going about from the sport point of view. But from my mental point of view, I said very little. I kind of probably went into myself a bit, and I was really struggling. But for the team, the guys fixed the car. I fixed the car. I had the insurance paid part of it, and I had to pay a part of it. And that was controversial as well, to get the car fixed. But anyway, we did that. And, I said to Paul, look, we'll go to Galway in 2005 and let's see what happens. But I went and did the recce, and I only told Paul this recently. Like, I very, very nearly pulled out at the last minute. I very nearly said, this is too much for me. I don't know how I'm going to react. I don't know when I'm going to be thinking every corner I go around, is it going to be a block of timber and a load of blocks on the road, like, because it was a block of timber with nails in it. That's what caused the accident, of course, And I just struggled, and then I just said, no, shit, I have to start the rally. So sitting on the start line in Galway 2005 was very difficult to get there. But again, whenever I took off, got the first stage over, it was okay. Went into the second stage. I don't remember the times, but I know that we were on the pace fairly quickly, and just all went away. Everything in the past just went away. There was no fear. There was no, what if this happens, that happens. It just completely dissolved the minute
that sense of
I got
peace
into that
and home
zone.
came back.
Yeah. When I got into that zone, it was gone. And you know, did it bother me afterwards? Of course it did. It always was in the back of my mind, but never when I was sitting in the rally car. Never.
And it was just that sense again,
Strangest
that
thing.
sense of, yeah, that is the strangest thing, because it's that sense of, it's total madness, really, when you think about it, because anything could happen and literally lives are at risk. But it's also that beautiful, that maybe it's the addiction that you mentioned. Personally, I genuinely do feel that there's just a gorgeous sense of presence. It's people mention adrenaline, and high adrenaline sports, and how, there is a psychological kind of impact on it, because it's the most present you'll ever be. Like you would sort of think the people that do these things are mad, but actually what they're doing is they're finding the deepest sense of peace that you possibly can, because you can't be anywhere else. You have to be in that moment, or it can get very dangerous.
Yeah, I remember back in the days when I was driving a Mark II Escort, a BDA Escort in the forest, and Paul Nagel was sitting with me. And I remember us going to forestry rallies and just going into this zone. And I always said that car, it had a uniqueness that you could drive it through the eye of a needle, but you could only master that if everything was in sync. And I remember Paul, and it shows how great he was back then. He's always gone on with massive success, and he's just retired. But I remember him being fit to read the pace notes as if they were read 1,000 times to me. And the way he was fit to actually do that, it just came across that we'd been down this road 1,000 times, and we never would have seen the piece of road. But it was the car, the connection that we had, and just the zone that I had got into.
Yeah.
And, that was very unique because of, the type of events that there was no recce on. You had no practice on them. So you were just jumping in the car, blind road, set of pace notes, the man beside you was reading them. But when it came to Paul, Kiley and myself in the later years of success, big success, it was more, we put a lot of work and effort into the preparation before the events. And while on the event then, it was just second nature. It was just, you just came along and it just happened because you'd put all that effort and all that work into it. So that zoning out thing, it never really, you were conscious of it all the time, not like the early days that you just drive the car through day and evening thing. You were conscious the whole time of what you were doing. Yeah. And it's like your bar was lifted a level, and like you just got into a place where you were in, you just, nothing could touch you. I remember us having big moments, like massive moments at 100 mile an hour, where the car's maybe stepped out, or maybe I've overcooked it a bit. And, your automatic reaction is to steer it out of it and recover the car. And, I just had the ability to do that second nature. And they never bothered us. You get to the end of the stage and half the time we never even spoke about it. And maybe you don't remember them? Yeah. But, maybe at the end of the rally, or Paul and I be chatting, or the onboard would be produced or published. Oh, cheers, Dad, do you remember that moment? Oh, that was a close one, at the time it was just second nature, I don't
know.
It was just
the mind's an interesting thing, the way it will just delete those moments that it just does not want you to remember.
No.
And Eugene, we've spoken so much about the, your sense of, I suppose, family and the social life, and basically how rallying is such a community, and there's such a beautiful camaraderie in it. And when you stopped competing, like how have you been able to fill that I suppose that void in your life?
Well, look, as I said, the yin and yang, I'm a great believer in it. Every good thing, there's a bad thing. And very unfortunately, I got badly struck down in 2009-10 with the financial downturn, and I got into financial difficulty. And I'm embarrassed to talk about it, but it happened. And there was a couple of reports widely publicised about difficulties that I'd got into. And to be quite honest, the most difficult part of the success is the you know, the community turning on you or people turning on you. And I said this recently to somebody, you can't get everybody to like you. And it's only as you get older you realize that. And I remember having a conversation way back, like when I won the first championship from another competitor who was very successful as well. And him and I sat down and had a conversation, and he says to me, Eugene, he said, I'm going to tell you. He said, you see now where you're at, and you've won your first championship, and you've had all this success, and everybody's behind you. You're on the way up. And he says, when you're up there, they will love you, and everybody's behind you. He says, see, once you start to falter, and you're on the way back down again, they'll tramp you into the ground. And he says, 50% of people will like you, 50% don't. That's nature. That's just who we are. Everybody you meet, you either instinctively like them or you don't. It's as simple as that. And there's not a human being in this world, I think, likes everybody. I personally, I don't hold grudges, and I don't do revenge or anything like that there. I'm a very neutral sort of a character. But, you know, I'm like everybody else. As people will say, oh, I'm not dying about your man, you know. But in my particular scenario, this is where the yin and yang really hit. Because when I was on the way back down again, you know, the stories that were put out about me, and some of the things that were said about me, and some of the things that were made up about me, that was extremely difficult. Like, that put me in a really bad place. Like, and, you know, whenever 2010, 11, geez, like I tell you, I went through as tough a years as I ever went through, you know, even with the tragedies in my younger life. And, you know, I kind of went through a bit of no man's land. I was working for different companies, and, you know, I was self-employed my whole life. I had my own businesses, and it's very hard to go and work for somebody. And I found that I kind of found a bit of a peacefulness in it in one sense, because, you know, there was no pressure in managing people, and there was no pressure in the payroll every week, or there was no pressure in making the business work. You just did your work, and whatever it was, 9 to 5 or whatever. And, you know, you got your day's pay, and like, I always had interests in other businesses that I had put a bit of investment into and stuff like that, but never really got involved in it. And I tiddled along like that there, a bit of no man's land for a few years. And that was the downers. That was the rock bottom, you know. And it was only in probably 2016, 17 that I started to realize, nah, I need to go back to the person I was, and I need to go back to my roots and who I actually am. And to try and find, you know, how would I put it? Try and find the strength, because I was quite a bit older. Like, you know, you're talking, I suppose, 7, 8 years ago. I was in my late 40s. You know, you don't have the same, you know, you don't have the same drive, you don't have the same energy. But I had to pick myself up and say, right, I need to go on and develop my own business again. And I was, you know, I was quite successful at consultancy work with different businesses, and I turned that into a good business where I had several companies on my books. And then I went on ahead to buy a couple of companies and get myself into a better position that I started controlling my own life again. And it's funny, going back to the success, whenever the success was there, everybody was there and wanted a piece of it. And everybody wanted to financially support you. Everybody wanted to do things for you. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. You know, we all like success, and I don't have any qualms about that there. But it's the old saying, you know, when you're up there and you have everything, everybody's your friend. See, when you're down and your arse is on the ground, there's not too many of them there long knocking on the door to pick you up, like, you know, or to say, hey, come on, give you an old hand out here, you know, or do you need a chat? Or that's probably where the therapy could have been doing, with kicking in, you know. Because I was in a very, very, very bad place around 2010, 11, 12, 13. Like, I wasn't in a good place, like, you know. So,
and how did you get through that?
I just kept my head down, and every day brought us challenges. And I suppose I didn't think too far ahead. I didn't think about what was in the future.
Was it the yin and yang thing again, where you knew that there's always good, but there's always bad, but there's always good again?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that I had to turn. But to be fair now, I was in a very lonely place, and I have a couple of very good friends that, I would chat to. Maybe, my two good friends, I would maybe only talk to them half a dozen times a year, but, we would visit each other, and just two real good, solid people that you can bounce things off if you have a bad day, But I was trying very, very, very hard with the businesses that I was involved in, the companies I was working for. I was trying really hard, and probably trying too hard. And, it didn't gel. It just didn't gel. And to go from where you were your own person, you were in control of your own destiny, you were in control of your family, and you were in control of everything around you, to actually relying on someone to pay your wages, to pay the bills, to keep the roof over your head, and to support your family. That was a low point. That was a real low point. I'm sure you can imagine. You were at the highest of highs, and when you're at the lowest of lows. Look, I looking back at it now, how did I get through it? I genuinely don't know. I just put my head down, and I just kept working day to day till I got myself back to the point where, right, I have to take control of this and myself,
And then, you just as I was cutting across you there, you were saying that you did a few rallies again. Did that get you back to the basics, the pure basics of enjoying the sport with your people and with the speed of the car beneath you?
Well, it's funny, the team that had all the success, myself and Paul and Charlie, the McGeehan Motorsport guys, Philip Moynihan and Ears Motorsport, that was the package, and that was the package that worked. Any rallying I did after that there, I had no real success with it. I went out with Derek's Mini, and I did Galway 3 or 4 times, finished second maybe twice, and crashed it once. But I had no success after that. I've done a few rallies, and there was small glimmers of, there were small glimmers that, the speed was still there, but the team wasn't there. And when the team's not with you, outside of the car, that team is worth a second or two a mile.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's difficult for anybody to understand. But if you have that support and that aura around you, and it's second nature, you get into the car and you don't have to think about anything. I was getting into the car and hiring it from Derek, and worrying about insurance, and worrying about crashing it, and worrying about if it did crash, where the money was going to come out to fix it, and all those sorts of things. And therefore, your mind was not at ease. And it was never, you never had that second a mile outside of the car.
Yeah.
So, I probably should have never go back into the car again at those days. It was probably trying to live the dream again, and it didn't work.
I know. And so, Eugene, now what keeps Eugene happy now, or what keeps you driven, or what keeps you focused and moving forward?
Well, I met somebody back 10 years ago, and we have a great life together. I go on holidays a lot more than I used to. I have, I think we were on holidays 3 times last year. I have 3 holidays I'm going on this year. I enjoy the family a lot more, but I'm still involved in the sport. We got involved with a tire company, which I did a lot of development work with them back in 2018 and 19. I got involved with Hyundai Motorsport. I instigated the whole motorsport Hyundai program by introducing Motorsport Ireland to Hyundai Motorsport back in 2018, and that's kind of where the academy was growing anyway. But I got them hooked up with Hyundai at that time, and then PCRS went on to take on, well, it's not really an agency, but to grow their relationship with Hyundai. So I enjoyed that, and I was involved in that. And as I say, I was involved with the tire company, MRF Tires, and they were starting to come into the European market. And I was fortunate enough to be very good friends with the European importer. And him and I don't know how it came about, but him and I got chatting, and he says, "Will you do a bit of work with us? And will you help support the tire and develop the tire? And will you not take the agency on for Ireland?" And I says, "Right, okay, I will." And I didn't really want to, because it's not my thing, but anyway, of that. And then in 2019, I got involved with Mellors Elliott Motorsport, who were developing a Proton R5 car, and I ended up doing a deal for one of those. They're the only homologated right-hand drive car in the world, homologated R5 car in the world, and got involved in that, thinking that would be a big plus. So did a few rallies with the car. The car was still quite underdeveloped at the time, and did a few rallies with the tire. And that started to gel a bit. Charlie was getting involved again. John McElhinney was a good friend. He was sitting in with me. And, we were starting to get a bit of momentum in it. And then COVID hit. And I don't know, I'd done 4 or 5 rallies with the wee car. COVID hit, and that was it. Everything was shut down. 2001, and kind of last year was really, it started to come back again.
Yeah.
And, during COVID, I was busy with a couple of companies that I was involved with. So I poured myself into the work, where everybody else had to sit at home. I was very fortunate that I had the businesses to turn to. And, they've done very well over the last few years. So that's what's keeping me busy. That was kept me busy then, and it's keeping me busy now. But I'm still dabbling about at the sport. I enjoy the challenge of developing the tire and making the tire work, which I'm confident we will, by the end of this year, we will have people using the tire that will be successful on it. And that's as good as me. That's as good as me being successful,
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it. And, I've been involved with involved with one driver who, I'd be very close to, and may have a bit of crack at it. And, I like to be on the fringes of it, but not right in the middle of the sport, And I still like to drive, don't get me wrong. I haven't drove a car in 2 years. I'm planning maybe to do a few events this year, but, it'll never replace the euphoria and the results that I had in the past, but it will replace the adrenaline rush. I will get that kick out of it again. There's no doubt about it. And I'll not be rallying I'm not rallying for the results. I'm rallying because of the self-satisfaction.
Yeah, it's that joy, and it just sounds like it's all come full circle, Eugene. And there's a you've spoken a few times about yin and yang, and maybe for years it was almost like they were separate, whereas now when you speak of it, it sounds like it's all balanced and it's all one. And there is a beautiful balance of a mixture of rally and life, and obviously as well. You're speaking there about the other things that you're involved in and giving back to the sport, being involved, but also helping other aspects to kind of, maybe show other people kind of how to do things that you clearly did very well. And there's obviously, it's not the same as, the feeling inside the rally car maybe, or the success inside the rally car, but there is a sense of purpose and a real sense of fulfillment when you have an opportunity to give back to something you love so much.
Well, look, I don't know anything else. I don't play golf. I don't play tennis. I'm not into football. I don't do anything else. It's been my life. So to be around it, it certainly brings a level of comfort, because I enjoy it. But I have to say, I'm 56 now, so I'm around the sport. I'm coming nearly 40 years around it, and I've seen a lot of changes in it. I've seen a lot of changes for the good, and there's some fantastic people the backbone of the sport. And what I have noticed, really in the last 5 years, is the amount of bickering and the amount of people not being happy with different elements of the sport, and people pulling against each other. And I just think it's really sad. Like, I think that's, we all love this sport so much, and
Yeah.
we should all try to work together and agree with our differences, but try and find solutions. And that's the
Exactly.
thing that frustrates me about it. Really frustrates me. And then if I give an opinion at all, like I give an opinion to somebody at the weekend, and I know it's going to come back to bite me in the ass, because I know somebody's going to turn around and say, "Oh, did you hear what Donnelly said?" And I just go, "What the fuck? Why do you
Yeah.
not say that? I'm only giving an opinion, but I'm not jamming it down your throat. I'm not saying this is what you have to do. It's just, I'm only just voicing something." And
Yeah.
it's left me very reluctant to say anything,
Yeah.
because I'm very conscious of people talking about me. Really, really conscious of that. That just,
Yeah.
that's the shyness. That's been
Yeah.
in me from I was a child, like, and I get it from my poor mother. She's like that. It's whereas Charlie, he's totally the opposite. He couldn't give two hoots what anybody says about
I
him,
know.
and he would be as brash, as brazen. He would laugh it off where it would
Yeah.
eat me up.
Uh-huh.
But the sport, I feel, the competitiveness is it, while, there seems to be a good camaraderie most way through the field, that has kind of remained. You know what I mean? That's been always there.
Yeah.
Us as a fellow competitors have always looked after each other. And sure, there's
Yeah.
rivals, like, sure,
Yeah.
as you know, you interviewed me and Andrew Nesbitt at the Ulster Rally. The competitiveness between the two of
Yeah.
us was
Yeah.
it was unbelievable. But when
Yeah.
we walked away from the cars, slap on the back and what's the crack, and
Yeah.
there was no hatred for each other, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that was the same. And I still believe that's there through the
Yeah.
sport at the minute, and through all the competitors that are there. Like, you can see that that's genuine. But when you step out of that and you start to look at the organisers and the marshals and the timekeepers and the amount of structure that has to go into an event now, which is massive because of the
Yeah.
safety aspect and the insurance aspect, and the sport is trying to get more professionalized and more regularized and try to save money. And there's no doubt about it, at the heart of the sport, there is, the people really, really, really have it in their hearts to make it better.
Yeah.
But what I can't understand is some of the bickering that goes on, and some of the public feuds that are going on. I just think that that's really, really sad, when there's absolutely no need for it. We're not talking about thousands of people,
Yeah. I think
And I find
sometimes, yeah, like that is the difficult aspect. And I think sometimes, when things, because Irish rallying has become so, I mean, it always was, but I suppose in recent years there's a huge element of professionalism brought to it now. And it just seems to be the way that, the more kind of professionalism and the more sort of competition is brought to the fore, there's obviously then an awful lot more people get involved, and these things happen. But as you say, like, it's just at the core of the sport, there's still such a beautiful heart. And it's these relationships. If you go back to all the friendships you've mentioned, it's these relationships that really genuinely do kind of keep us all there and hold the whole thing together. And so with that being said, like, what is your favorite memory of the sport? Your proudest memory of the sport? Or your time in it?
Well, I think there has to be a few of them, and it's very difficult to narrow it down. But from a general sporting point of view, I think being part of motorsport in Ireland, north and south, and to be fair, there's another subject we can touch on that there. It's a wee bit controversial, but I think the greatest achievement that I've seen from the sport that I've been involved in was bringing Rally Ireland to this country.
Yes.
To bring Sebastian Loeb, who turned out to be the 9 times champion, the greatest rally driver who ever lived. And he's rallied on these shores. He's done events along with me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've done Donegal, and he's been there. And I ran the car behind him in Donegal, and
Yeah.
2007. Like, that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've raced Marcus Grunholm in Galway in 2007. I, again, Loeb was in Cork. You can't, those moments were, for someone who is passionate about the sport, the greatest
Magic.
drivers in the world came to Ireland to rally and actually left very, very impressed. So, those moments in 2007, as I say, were probably the highlights. Like, the one inside the car, and I'm sure if anybody's heard interviews before, they've heard me talk about this here, was starting the Galway Rally on the second day, leaving Park Fermy, nice crisp sunny morning, cold day, and Paul Kelly turns around and he says to me, when we were sitting at the out control in Park Fermy, he says, "Look behind you." And I goes, "Why, what's behind me?" He says, "Look behind you." So I look behind me and I was going, what am I supposed to be looking at? It's not every day you start in front of a 2-time world champion, is it? I just looked at him and I went, "Freaking right."
I know. I mean, what a moment.
That's exactly. And the funny thing about it, on the way to Park Fermy, we were in the car, and I think James Foley was driving and I was in the back seat. And U2, Beautiful Day, came on the radio. And it couldn't have picked a better song to put you in fantastic form for a day's rallying,
The soundtrack for that day.
Yeah, and then the yin and yang. We were leading the rally and we had a gearbox problem and mishap and went out of the rally. So that was the low. So there's the yin and yang again,
Yeah, it's just, it's the yin and yangs everywhere, isn't it?
It is. But I suppose, those were the highlights that the sport has given me. To meet Sebastian Loeb, to meet Marcus Grunholm, who I've remained in contact with and remained, I could say, as a distant friend. He came over to do some testing with us there, Christmas 2019, or was it before Christmas or after? It was before Christmas 2019. He came over and he tested the Proton and he tested MRF tires, and he stayed for a few days. And my daughter was running one of the little restaurant hotel places in Driverstown, and he stayed there, and we got to meet him and went out for a pint with him and a dinner with him. And we've stayed in touch, and he's now taken on the MRF agency for Finland. So we message back and forward and how we're getting on with things. So those are like, that's a 2-time world champion. Like, that man's a god, like, in the sport. Like, and to have met him and to have a rapport with him. And again with Loeb, I mean, we had to be fair to Paul built a great relationship with Daniela and Loeb, like, but to have met them and talked to them, and they're just down to earth people. Like,
I know.
It's just been those are the highlights. I think one other thing that the sport has brought me is, with other drivers. And back when Craig Breen was doing the European rounds in the Peugeot, he quite kindly asked me to come along and do a bit of support work on him on the events. And I did some gravel notes for him, probably not very successfully, but I did my best. But he brought me to Monte Carlo, and he brought me to some European events. I think I went to Monte Carlo twice, but like, that was a bit of a surreal thing. You're out doing gravel notes with all the World Championship guys, and that was a bit surreal, and another fantastic moment, and what the sport had brought me.
I know.
But there was the other side of it too. Is there's a lot of tragedy in the sport as well, and we've lost people that have been great friends, and that's difficult to manage as well.
Yeah, and it's, again, I know if I had a euro for every time I said it this evening, I could probably go rallying again myself. But again, it's just the yin and yang, isn't it? It's mad how it's just an ever present thing in our lives, and there's ups and downs, and I mean, no better place to see all of that play out other than rallying. Like, it's just so in your face.
Well, I think people who don't participate in it or do not have a love or a passion for it they'd find it hard to understand. And I think that's what you're trying to portray with this. You're trying to actually, get people who are maybe not interested in the sport to understand what the attraction is.
Yeah,
that we're not a bunch of hooligans or white racers.
That there's so much
Because
more
that's the
going
word.
on behind it.
Yeah. There is a very professional sport there, and it's run extremely professional, and that's, I see what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say, that there's a human aspect to this here, and that there is structure behind it, and that there, it's not just, we all turn up and throw a drop of petrol in an old car with our old kids and go ripping around the roads. It's not like that.
And as you say, we're not all a crowd of headers that just love a pile of speed and away we go. Like that, there's so much that competitors and teams do and give up and sacrifice in order to be there. And although we do it because we love it, it does shape you as a person, and it does have a huge impact on your life. So it's just one of those things where it's so interesting to try and understand what that is for different individuals, and honestly, Eugene, this has been so enlightening. It has been such a privilege to chat with you, and an honor to hear your full story and how you got to this moment in your life. And I want to thank you for being here with us.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I've enjoyed the chat. All right. As I say, I'm not a hugely outgoing person. I'd be quite shy, but get me in front of a camera or a mic and I can chat away the best, talk plenty of shit.
No bother to you at all. Eugene, thank you so much for being here and, for giving up your time to tell us your story.
The Irish Rally Podcast is brought to you in association with Tech and Tools, SVS Productions, PFT Travel, Rally Connection and Murray Motorsport.